over our time together this morning, we're going to be hearing from colleagues in Bristol, Coventry and London on a diverse range of approaches they've deployed to getting the right supply of food to where it needs to be throughout the school holidays. It seems rather fitting in a way. I'm joining you here from a pantry in Feeding Derbyshire, part of the Feeding Britain network, where last year 17,000 children took part in HAF and accessed some wonderful nutritious food that they would not otherwise have accessed, sadly. And then through the consumption of that food, we're able to take part in a whole range of fun and enriching activities too. So it's just cemented in my mind this morning the transformative nature of HAF in the impacts it has on children's immediate quality of life, as well as their longer term life chances. So I'm going to hand over without further ado to Jo Ingleby from the Children's Kitchen in Feeding Bristol. Jo, would you like to kick us off, please?
Sure. So good to see everybody today. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about our approach in Bristol, which has been very much a coordination and kind of partnership approach with the council and with the steering group, which Feeding Bristol and the Children's Kitchen is part of throughout the whole year. So we meet every other week throughout, even when we're not actually planning an imminent holiday. I'm going to share some slides with you, and then I'm really happy to answer questions at the end. So hopefully you'll be able to see this. And somebody just, Andrew, I can see you. Can you see that okay?
Yeah, we can see that, Jo. Great.
Perfect, wonderful. Okay, so our approach in Bristol is that we work with multi-agencies in terms of delivery of the HAF programme. So lots of different grassroots organisations from the play sector, from the sports sector, creative, run the HAF programme. They apply for a HAF grant and then go through a grant selection process, which we're part of as well. But that's a long-term programme. We're looking at building strength within these organisations so that it carries on through more HAF delivery time, but also in the future as well. We look at the data around the areas of highest need within Bristol in terms of free school meals and make sure that the provision happens where it should, and also that there isn't too much happening in one area where there might not be much happening in another. We look at working with many different organisations who have a real in-depth knowledge of the local communities and the local young people, so that we make sure that we're actually bolstering organisations that work all year round with young people and build their trust. And we try and think to the future, making sure that the programme is building strength for future work, but also sustainable in a more city-friendly way, so that we're trying to source ingredients locally. We're trying to focus on outdoors and environmental, that's being part of the programme, and food education being part of that too. We're also looking at ways that the food delivery itself can be sustainable by cutting down on plastic disposables and encouraging things like reusable water bottles as well. So Feeding Bristol has been part of HAF since before HAF. So we were part of the Holiday Hungers programme in 2019 with Fair Share South West, where we fundraised and provided food and activities to children throughout that summer. And we worked to campaign and raise money for that one. It put us in a position where we had quite a strong network already of working with Fair Share, but also working with other partners to get things like wholesale fruit and veg deliveries and links to local community farms, those sorts of things. And it also meant that the Children's Kitchen, which is part of Feeding Bristol, we started to do family food sessions and cooking with young people during that summer. Since then, we've built on this. We now are part of the HAF steering group, and my particular role is the food education and the food quality element of the HAF provision in Bristol. So that involves lots of different things, which I'll take you through in the next few slides. But the overarching focus in Bristol is the food equality strategy and action plan. As currently being written and being acted on across Bristol, it's multi agencies, it's public health, it's council, it's also charity sector, it's also vast numbers of community groups involved in actually saying what would make a difference to them around food insecurity, and finding ways to tackle that. And the HAF programme is part of that, and we make sure that it always relates to the food equality strategy. Okay. So one of the big parts of the Bristol approach has been to actually enable and empower the groups to be able to lead food education sessions within their provision, but also be able to cook meals with children and for children. We tried to move away from everybody having packed lunches, which is what happened in the first year of HAF, and we did find that the nutritional content of those packed lunches wasn't great. It was basically like a meal deal. We wanted to move away from that. So to find ways of actually increasing the skills and the understanding of nutrition and what actually the school food guide involves is a big part of that. So we run a programme called Food Leaders, which is open and free to any of the HAF providers within Bristol. We've trained about 40 different organisations, and it's a 5-week, 3 hours a week hands-on course with some of the best food educators and chefs in Bristol. Within that, they learn about the school food guide, what it actually means and how to relate that when you're planning a menu, but also how to embed food education and make it fun in kind of short, quick activities that aren't expensive, that are accessible, they are diverse and they're safe. And safety is a big thing. So part of Food Leaders is also an understanding about allergen awareness, culturally appropriate foods, actually considering preferences as well, and not just assuming that all children will eat the same food. And it's very practical. So the very last session is actually the learners showing us their dish and teaching us how to cook it. So we work with different chefs with this. We work with an organisation called 91 Ways, which reflects the 91 languages of Bristol, and the different food that people share being a really great way of bringing people together. And Food Leaders is something that's worked, we've done it outside of HAF as well, just for any community group. We're currently running it with people who work with people over 55, and we're just about to run another one, which is just an open access to any community. Excitingly though, we've got NHS funding to develop this as a digital programme. So hopefully by September, we'll have it ready to go as a pilot. And then by the end of autumn, we'll have it as an open course, which anybody in theory who's a HAF provider could do across the country. But Andrew, I'll keep you posted about that and you can share news to everybody. The food support around providing hot meals is something we've been involved with, because I think a lot of organisations were quite daunted by the idea of cooking for children and quite often didn't have either facilities or training or the kind of understanding and confidence to do that. So we try where possible to support organisations to cook for themselves, which has worked in many organisations. Sometimes it's very simple, sometimes the children are involved and sometimes they're not. Sometimes it's things like getting the school chef to stay on during the holidays and cook, but quite often it's a mixture of working with a local caterer or provider and also doing some food that the children cooking themselves. Food education being seen as part of HAF as much as possible, so children are learning about what they're eating and not just being fed. And working with local organisations, local charities, local restaurants and chefs to make sure that those organisations that don't have a kitchen and don't have access to cooking themselves can bring somebody in who can supply nutritious food that is culturally appropriate and it's safely made and delivered. And part of what my actual job during the summer and the winter holidays and Easter is to actually lead hands-on cookery sessions with the children's kitchen chefs across the city. So we open that up to any activity provider to basically say that they'd like us to come along, and we'll go and spend a whole day where we're cooking with the children, quite often with whole families, and they're very, very hands-on, led by colour, led by multi-sensory exploration and our diverse and very passionate chefs that we work with. Sorry, I'm trying to move it on. So our sessions are all linked up together. So we also provide recipe packs, which go out to children who aren't able to access face-to-face HAF, but also are used within our sessions and given to other other organisations to hand out. So we'll have a recipe pack, a recipe booklet that we provide for a holiday that will get printed out for pretty much everybody that wants one. We've done, I think, 4 webinars which have been open access for HAF providers, and that's also gone to national HAF providers as well, around things like allergen understanding, culturally appropriate food, cooking for children who have SEN or other access issues to food. And also we promote the Food Leaders course whenever we can, so that the more people can do this kind of programme, hopefully the more varied and interesting the food will be that people can cook for children. This is one of the sessions. So the thing I notice the most is that when children are engaged, and especially if they've also been picking food, so quite often we work in gardens or places where we can get some locally sourced food, the children will eat the food if they've made it themselves. It's a really powerful way of increasing the nutritional kind of benefit of the food, is actually engaging them in the cooking themselves. But when we can involve families as well, that's also really powerful. Quite often families will see their children eating something or cooking something that they didn't know they were interested in. They then can take home a recipe pack, they can take home a meal kit, or they can take home ingredients and carry that on at home. And that's something that we hope will continue from holiday to holiday, and then hopefully in the future through the school term as well. And that brings us to the end. If anyone has any questions about our approach in Bristol, I'm really happy to answer them today, or you can email me on my email address here. You can also access a lot of the HAF resources through the Feeding Bristol website and the recipes through Bristol Early Years. So I am happy to answer any questions that you have.
Brilliant, Jo. Thank you very much. I'm conscious that you'll need to leave in a fairly short while, so I might invite people, if that's okay, to leave any written questions in the chat box, and perhaps we could turn to those after we hear from Faye and Helen in Coventry, if that's okay with everyone. So please do get typing, and failing that, Jo has kindly shared her email address, but in the meantime, it's over to Faye and Helen at Feeding Coventry.
Hi there, everybody. We're just going to get our slides up. That should be, can everyone see that? Okay, I'm hoping everyone can see that.
Yeah, that's just loaded up, Helen.
That's great. Hi everyone, so I'm Helen, I'm the CEO at Feeding Coventry, and this is Faye, my colleague, who's the HAF project lead here at Feeding Coventry. So we got involved in the HAF programme from its very start, and just like Feeding Bristol, actually, we were involved in providing food packages along with activity packages before HAF. So we got involved like from the very first summer, and just to explain what we do here is that we run a social supermarket alongside wraparound support services and a creative wellbeing programme, and we have a community garden, and we wanted to incorporate all of those amazing things that we do into our HAF programme, which we run for 4 weeks over the summer. 2 weeks at Easter and then a week at Christmas. So we've been on quite a journey, which Faye is going to take you through. But we started that journey and we've continued on that journey very much with sticking to the values of our grassroots organisation, which is making sure that all of the suppliers that we engage with on the programme, whether that's food suppliers or activity suppliers, are local organisations and local activity suppliers, and local people are employed on the programme that are part of the community. So we're, putting any resources back into the local economy from this programme, and really reaching out to local children to Forsey, which is the most deprived area in Coventry. And we're just going to talk you through some of the successes, some of the challenges that we've had along the way in doing that. So I'm going to hand over to Faye now to talk us through the journey of where we started with our food provision.
Right, so when we first started our HAF programme, we did have a real limited capability for in-house cooking. We only had a potato oven and a few hobs that we could use. So we did a mix on the first HAF programmes. We did mainly outsource and go down the packed lunch route with a local supplier that we already had an existing relationship with. We then started to introduce some chefs to come in and to cook some of the meals for us, and we also engaged with a local organisation called Groundworks,
that's
sorry.
it.
And they came in and did cooking sessions with the children and actually as a family as part of the sessions that we were offering. So the slide just shows kind of examples of the food we have offered to the children as part of our journey. Each HAF programme we've found that we've found ways of tweaking our food offering, making it better. And this most recent HAF programme, we've actually used our in-house chef that we now have for our new cafe area to both cook the meals for the HAF sessions, but also to run the in-house cooking sessions with the families, which has gone down really well. We found initially using the external providers, because you have to get the orders in for the food initially, before you get your turnout on the day, we were finding that we were getting quite a bit of food wastage. So each programme we've kind of looked at different ways of managing that food wastage. So by taking orders from those people that had booked in as to what kind of sandwiches they wanted, to then kind of making the sandwiches in-house initially, to order when people come. We try and cook using ingredients that we've got within the supermarket that have been donated to us. So we're using a lot of the fresh ingredients, and also doing our shopping locally rather than bulk buying lots of food in. We've actually found that by doing more regular shops for the food, it's actually kept the cost down quite a bit and enabled us to be a bit more flexible on the food offering. Helen's just flicked onto this slide for us. One of the kind of real key things for us is encouraging people to eat together as a family in a community setting, but somewhere that looks really special. So you can see on the pictures of how our halls have been decorated for the Christmas and last summer's programme these were from. But it's a real, because of how we operate in the community centre, it's a real kind of family focus. So we encourage parents to come along and attend the sessions with the children. We obviously feed the siblings, so the younger siblings that aren't necessarily at school yet but still need to be fed. We encourage them to come along, and it's a real it's amazing how much the children will eat when they're around the peers, when they're sitting down and eating as a family, rather than just what they would necessarily eat at home. We've had a lot of feedback from families that actually have said the environment that we're providing for them, as well as the engagement with the cooking the food themselves, and kind of being talking through where it comes from, what all these new foods are, really does encourage them to try things that they wouldn't necessarily try in other ways. Okay, the other things we've found that have worked really well is, obviously, I know Joe at Bristol mentioned that kind of tying into the garden space. We have our community garden here at the community centre, that's run by volunteers on a weekly basis. But we, as part of our HAF programme, we've been offering garden sessions where the children can go and learn about the plants, have a go at planting, weeding, and just enjoying the outdoor space. And that actually does really link in so well to our food offering. The pictures in the bottom right hand corner are from our recent Easter HAF programme, and this is the group of children who were involved in the cooking session, going out and choosing the herbs that they wanted to include within their own meal, snipping them, taking them in and washing them and prepping them ready to use in the food that they ate. And it actually was amazing to see how many children were trying these herby salads, that because they created it, they put it together and they knew what was going into it. The other pictures are illustrating how we've kind of taken a fun approach, giving everyone a chance to create their own salads, to play with their food in a way that makes it more interesting, so creating imagery, and that again encouraged them to try different foods or add in different kind of herbs and spices to the salads. The other picture is where we've engaged with local artists. So this lady, who is called Lisa Franklin, she does a lot of work with predominantly mushrooms, but actually she brought in a variety of food and vegetables and was able to link them up electronically, and they all play different sounds. It sounds a lot more complicated than I can explain, but it was really interesting. And actually, it just getting the children engaged with the different types of food. Some of them look a bit strange; they might not come across them, but they were all what's the word? They were just enthralled. Yeah. They were enthralled by it, as were we. So just trying different approaches to kind of bringing food into the forefront of the children's imagination. So it's not just kind of a structured learning approach, it's kind of part of the fun and bringing people new experiences. That's kind of how we looked at tying into the activities. I think some of the other things around kind of like tips and around the preparation of the food, we talked about kind of seating everyone together in a real kind of family environment, and that has really proved that it works well for us. We've also started offering breakfasts at the beginning of sessions, which wasn't something we initially did, but we introduced it at Christmas, and actually it worked really well. It encouraged people to kind of come in earlier, so it did combat some of the issues with people kind of not turning up or turning up halfway through the session, but also it enabled people to kind of come in, feel comfortable, get to know people, get to know the surroundings before the session starts. So everyone kind of just seemed to really welcome that approach. So that's definitely something we're going to continue with going forward. And then we have the challenges in our local area that there's lots of different dietary requirements. So we do have a lot of vegetarian requirements, halal. So we try and offer a predominantly vegetarian or vegan offering to kind of cover the majority of everyone's needs. And actually we found that those children that come into us that are normally kind of meat eaters are more than happy trying and experimenting with some of the vegetarian options that we have going on. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I haven't covered, Helen.
I think from my perspective, I think it's actually engaged our whole community. Very much at Feeding Coventry, in terms of like the social supermarket and the members and volunteers that we have here. So members become volunteers and, like, you know, sometimes paid staff on the HAF programme as well, which has been really amazing for us to support people to do that. But what we've seen is a whole community engaged in actually, you know, soil to plate really. So actually seeing the food grown in the garden and being really committed to that and using that in the kitchen and getting that into like the dishes that we cook. And it's been really lovely that actually we've witnessed that the more you can engage people in the actual growing of the food, the preparation of the food, making sure that people know what they're eating, through providing menus, through having those conversations at the table, making sure that volunteers and staff you know, are educated about the food themselves, so they can have those conversations with the families. We found that actually, I personally feel really proud that it feels like a whole community is now grown with their knowledge around food and healthy eating. And I know that I can see, like, our volunteers and our people that engage with the community centre coming back to us and telling us that they're like experimenting with different foods at home and eating different foods at home and cooking in healthier ways that they've learned through engaging at the centre. And that's the feedback we're having, and that's what I'm most proud of, that I feel like we're giving people this, you know, really special experience that also provides education. If anyone's got any questions, we'd be happy to take them.
Brilliant, Helen and Faye, thank you very much. And I must admit, I had the great pleasure of dropping into Feeding Coventry during the Easter holiday, and judging by the quality and the range of fresh fruit you had in the bags for children once they've finished their activities that day, I would advocate wholeheartedly for that direct link that you've made with your local fruit and veg supplier and wholesaler. It really was superb. And thank you very much for lots of hints and tips that you've shared there. Because I'm hopeless in using my phone, what I can't see is whether colleagues from Felix Project or FareShare have been able to join us to make their presentation. If so, might you please put your hand up so I can turn to you in a moment. And in the meantime, I see there's one question coming in the chat that perhaps we could put to Jo, Helen and Faye before Jo has to leave. And this is from Daisy, linked to food, but separate nonetheless, around safeguarding. Daisy says, what do you do around safeguarding when you're inviting adults into sessions with children? Can I invite volunteers to have a go at answering Daisy's question, please?
Back again. I mean, that's a tricky one, because you don't want to discourage families from coming. Generally, when we invite families, we make it clear that when you're there with your children are your responsibility, like they would be in any public place. When we have sessions which are for children on their own, that's when our safeguarding policies come in, that no random parents or adults are going to come in and join the group. So I'd say that the family groups are for families where they've signed in, we've got their details. It's obviously not practical to be doing DBSs on parents. That's not going to work. We don't want to discourage them, but we do say that they're responsible for their children when they're on site, and that we make sure that they're not one-to-one with other people's children. Is that the same in Coventry? Quiet. Daisy, does that answer your question? Great.
Brilliant, Daisy, thank you for your question. Jo, thank you for answering. I think Helen and Faye might have frozen. They certainly have on my screen.
Still. Oh no, they've moved now.
Brilliant. Did you have anything to add to that, Helen and Faye?
We approach it in much the same way, that we make sure that in the communications that we send out to parents prior to the sessions, that we're really clear that they're responsible for their children. And also we make sure, like, our staff are all briefed on, like, their kind of health and safety processes, the safeguarding processes, and that actually there are certain areas of the building that are off limits to the public, because that's where the HAF program's taking place. So we make sure we just keep areas controlled throughout the building. Simple methods like that to just make sure that we're managing that it is only the parents and the children are in the room. We have somebody on welcoming on the door here, so that every person who walks into the building, we welcome them to find out why they've arrived, and that they're directed to the support that they need. And we find that really helps control, who comes in and out of the sessions.
I've just seen another question come up there about using local suppliers if they're expensive, especially organic local farms. I mean, we use a mixture, to be honest. In the summer, even the local expensive farms tend to have glut ingredients that they're happy to give you at a lower price. But it is about building that relationship during the year and not just doing it all last minute. We also have, in Bristol, we approached the wholesale fruit market, which is where the fruit and veg shops would go to buy their fruit. So we're obviously buying that at wholesale prices. So that's something that's worth probably now actually starting to see what's available locally. Talk to a local grocer and see where they actually buy their fruit from, rather than trying to buy it all from your local grocer. But also being aware that actually if you can put more economy into your local high street, that's a great thing, that if you're actually spending the money on the high street. I think Feeding Coventry, you've got Forsey Road on your doorstep, which is very close to where I'm from. So I'm kind of very jealous of you having that on your doorstep. Many towns and cities have areas where there's lots of shops where they would be quite happy to give you fruit at a very low cost, especially in the summertime where it doesn't last too long. Does that help?
Yeah, the other thing to do is, if you can try and connect with any local allotment associations. We get quite a lot of fruit and veg through the summer through the local allotment associations, and they're really delighted to share that with us. And it's been lovely actually. So if you can make that connection, that could really help.
Brilliant. And that reminds me of a couple of other parts of the Feeding Britain network. Down in Bath and North East Somerset, we've got a terrific crop drop initiative that links up the allotment holders with the food clubs, and more recently in Feeding Bradford, where it's a similar scheme to crop drop, but they've called it Share Your Spare, where all the allotment holders can get the fruit and veg flowing through to projects of this nature. That's been terrific. Could I invite Layla to come back in just with any follow-up questions or comments on the answers that we've just heard on local supplies? And while Layla is typing, perhaps I can invite anyone now with any questions or comments to share from their own area. Please feel free to put your hand up or pop something in the chat as we start to head to a conclusion. Otherwise, I'll assume that people are starving and looking forward to their lunch. Great, Layla, thank you. I suppose perhaps while people think of their question or start thinking about what they're going to have for lunch in a few minutes, may I invite Jo, Helen and Faye for any final hints or tips that people could bear in mind for their area as they start to piece together their supply chains for the summer holiday? What's the one bit of advice above all else that you'd wish to share, please?
I think for us in Bristol, it's partnership working. It's trying to think outside of, what the problems are and trying to tackle the positive solutions. So, for example, thinking about, are there restaurants who see lower trade during the summer who would be happy to step in and cook some hot meals, which is what's worked well here. But also the training element of it and the supporting people to feel confident about delivering food education sessions themselves and also cooking themselves has been really powerful in Bristol. It's really worked well. So I think focusing on empowering and actually building up the team you already have is a really successful thing to do. Oh, I've just seen a message as well. Engaging parents, actually, I mean, with cooking, that's been the thing where they will come along and they'll join in. But also gardening. I think gardening is something that is quite it's quite kind of comfortable for parents to come and just be outside and be in nature. So I think if you have got a garden, you can use within the food education criteria of HAF, growing is seen as part of it, which is really refreshing to see. So, you know, make the most of that and actually use outdoor spaces.
I think from my perspective, what I've really appreciated over the last couple of HAFs that we've run is to have that consistent offering from our in-house chef. It's really helped to reduce, like, it's helped us plan in advance. It's helped us to make sure that we're more organised so that we can engage the children better, we can engage the parents better, and that we can make sure that, it's a real wide variety of food offering that the children are really going to enjoy. But it also, 4 weeks is a long programme to run, isn't it? We all get quite tired. I don't know if everybody else does, but it's really nice to have that consistent team, that consistent offering. So I would recommend that if you can do that, that's something that's worked really well for us, rather than outsourcing it. And I'm so glad that we've moved such a long way from that first HAF that we ever did, where we, as you said at the beginning, we thought, oh, how are we going to provide the food though for this number of children for this amount of time? Although we're Feeding Coventry and passionate about what we're doing, we were quite a new organisation at the time, and as Faye said, we didn't have our kitchen and cafe at the time, so it was a real challenge for us. And I think it's something we're quite proud of now. We can look back from where we came to where we are now to say that we can confidently provide our in-house offering, and it is cheaper, and it is better produce, and it is better for the children. And I would advocate that all round.
I think also that taps into is it Kirsten's question about reducing food waste. I think definitely being able to be more reactive, so by doing it in-house and having the ability to be more flexible, it means that if we do get a lot of no-shows in the morning, we can kind of pare back what we're offering for lunch, so that there is less wastage. Whereas when you're ordering it in, it's just kind of, that's where you're ending up with a lot more food waste. So if you can do it in-house, it definitely does help.
We've found over the last couple of HAF programmes, actually, since it has been in-house chef, and we've done a lot of this engagement around what people are eating, getting them involved in picking it, eating it, and designing what they're eating. We found there's been very little food wastage, actually, and that's really good to see, because to start with, we did have some food waste, and that was a concern.
Mm-hmm.
Brilliant, guys, thank you.
This can be a problem. I've heard that it can be a bit of a problem to come by chefs. I just connected with local people from, there's like an organisation called the Pod, which is like a mental health cafe in Coventry, and was able to source a chef from there. Also connected with Digbeth Dining Club, and somebody that I knew from there, and she's currently chefing for us at the minute. So just reached out to any connections that I knew really in the local area to see who was willing to come along and help us. Rachel will always say, who was this person on Facebook Messenger? You like reaching out to her when she was like not sure that she wanted to get involved, but now she's involved. She absolutely loves it, and really passionate about the work that we do here.
We've also found that actually a lot of our volunteers, there's specific volunteers who have really engaged with having an in-house chef who's been involved in training them up so they can kind of really support with the food offering. And it's just amazing to see from a volunteer's perspective, but also from an overall offering. It's kind of embedding what Helen was saying about the whole journey of taking people on from becoming a member to becoming a volunteer to now being involved in delivering and supporting how delivering the food offering to our HAF programme. So.
Yeah, I mean, I actually feel really confident with the training that they've received and the training that they're going to receive, that some of the volunteers here would be really confident that they could be employed as a chef fairly soon. And we've only had our cafe up and running since January.
Yeah.
That's a remarkable success story, Helen and Faye. And one question I had in mind, which you've begun to answer, but I might ask you to elaborate upon in a moment, is any link or overlap that exists within your centre between your year-round social supermarket and in the HAF programme during the school holidays. So I might ask you to talk about that a bit more in a moment, if I may. But first, I'm not sure if Jenny Cast is able to unmute and describe in a bit more detail the project she's mentioned in the chat from Birmingham of the Family Food Fridays as a way of putting food to good use and raising engagement levels in the process. Jen, are you able to describe that for us, please?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Andrew. I think really resonating with the comments that we're coming through around how challenging it's been to engage parents and families, and the food end of the programme certainly seems to be kind of, you know, the catalyst for that family engagement. But again, we had probably seen, you know, okay results. So during Easter, and something that we piloted a little bit over Christmas, was to introduce a family Friday, a family food Friday, because we know in terms of HAF provision that Friday is quite often the day that the providers aren't delivering on. So this is something that we coordinated centrally, and we worked right across the city, and we used community providers in community venues, and we set it up as an independent booking. But those families came along, they registered for the activities, and during that session, it was kind of a cook-along session. So we had different partners. Digbeth Dining Club, I know, have been mentioned. They were one of our key partners in the delivery of this programme. But we had about 3 or 4 different organisations that we worked with. We had a chef at the front, kind of tables and stations within those facilities and rooms. The parents and the children got to prep the food, cook the food, and then obviously they ate together there, but they also took things to take home. And over this pilot period that we've seen at the beginning of this year, we've engaged over 1,000 families in that process. So just an idea that we found has worked really well. We're hoping that our funding and our budget will stretch to enable us to do this over the summer period as well, because it is an add-on to the clubs, if you like, but something that's gone down really well that we found in Birmingham.
Terrific, Jen, thank you. And I suppose it fits into this broader theme that's emerging across the Feeding Britain network around how HAF can embed itself as part of a broader year-round offer of support for children and their families. So I would love to bring us to a close just by returning to that question, Faye and Helen, around what links or overlap exist between your social supermarket and the HAF Club, please.
So what we were saying before about how the social supermarket, so the customer journey, so the social supermarket, we find people come either initially with a household support voucher or just become a member through word of mouth. We then find that then we're kind of getting people to engage in the HAF programme and further support from our team here as well, but it works vice versa. So we were getting a lot of people that are coming to us for HAF that aren't aware of the other offerings that we here at the Forsey Community Centre. So as part of the HAF sessions, when we're engaging with the families, trying to understand what their current situation is, what support they might need, and for those where it's appropriate, if they're in the right area and they meet the right criteria, getting them signed up for membership of the social supermarket, but also having them to engage with us in any other support that they might need, and our wider wellbeing programs that we run throughout the year. So it's kind of quite circular, but goes in both directions, if that answers your question.
Yeah, terrific, Faye, thank you. And I suppose, given that in this centre there is a community pub, I'm going to call last orders, if I may, before we close this workshop. Any final questions or thoughts or comments, please, before we draw to a close? Great, Nancy, thank you. Any last orders? If not, I believe we just turn our cameras and our microphones off and wait to rejoin at 1:10. So going once, going twice. Brilliant. Well, I can only echo therefore the comments that you're receiving, Faye and Helen and Joe as well in the chat, by saying a huge thank you for being so generous with your expertise and your time this morning. I've certainly been jotting down notes like you wouldn't believe, with some great ideas. And if anyone has any follow-up questions, please do get in touch with the organisers. Jo left her email address as well. I know people will be only too pleased to discuss in more detail. But in the meantime, guys, another big thank you for sharing with us this morning, and look forward to seeing everyone again in around 40 minutes time. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.